everybody, Derek here from Bomb Socks with another round of Bomb Bites where we feast upon the words of Christ and we do it one bite at a time. So this week is section 84 of the Doctrine and Covenants, and there's like 120 verses in this section. So it's a huge, massive section, so we're just literally going to take this one little principle at a time this week, and they all have to do with the priesthood. Now what's interesting is you go to the Come Follow Me, there's a great little introduction here, and it says, ever since the priesthood was restored in 1829, Latter-day Saints have been blessed by that sacred power. They were baptized, confirmed, called to serve by priesthood authority, much like we are today. But having access to priesthood power is not the same thing as completely understanding it. Boy, isn't that true? And God had more he wanted his saints to understand, particularly with the coming restoration of temple ordinances. The 1832 revelation on the priesthood, now Doctrine and Covenants 84, which we're talking about, expanded the saints' vision of what the priesthood really is. And it can do the same for us today. After all, there is a lot to learn about the divine power that holds the key of the knowledge of God, that makes manifest the power of godliness, and that prepares us to see the face of God, even the Father, and live. So that's really what this section is all about, is really helping those priesthood holders really understand what they have at their fingertips. Now, in Come Follow Me, the very first thing it says is this, and it's such a cool phrase. It says, I have access to God's priesthood power and blessings. So when you think of the word priesthood, what comes to mind? How often do you think about the priesthood and its influences in your daily life? After pondering these questions, study Doctrine and Covenants 84, 1 through 5, and then 17 to 28, and consider what the Lord wants you to know about his priesthood power. How could you use these verses to describe the priesthood to someone else and explain its purposes? So I want you to go ahead and do that. So just take a minute, look through those verses. Again, it's section 84, 1 through 5, and then 17 to 28. And we're going to come back and just focus on one little thing that I think is pretty amazing. So go ahead and do that. We'll come right back. Okay, so one of the things I want to focus on is verse number 20, okay? So in verse number 20, it talks about how, therefore, in the ordinances thereof, the power of godliness is manifest. And so back in that Come Follow Me, it actually says, you might also ponder the priesthood ordinances you have participated in. How have you seen the power of godliness manifest in them? Consider what the Lord wants you to do to receive more of his power in your life. So this priesthood is, as it said, I think in verse 17, it said, it is without beginning of days or end of years. And boy, when you guys figure that one out, let me know. It is hard to be able to wrap my finite mind around something that is eternal in nature. You know, my father has passed away and he's a priesthood holder. I love to think that he still has access to that priesthood power. I wonder if I've been given priesthood blessings on the other side. Because there have been times where I have felt that closeness, and maybe some of you out there, you have felt that other side of the veil where you've got a priesthood holder who still is an active priesthood holder on the other side. It's not like that priesthood ends at death. It continues. It is eternal. And I'd love to be able to see how individuals on the other side are still able to use that priesthood authority to bless our lives. So speaking of those ordinances, some of my greatest spiritual experiences have come from priesthood ordinances. In fact, there's one in particular that to me always stands out as one to where I have seen the faith of another individual and how I was able to be a part of that and be able to see the power of godliness manifest. So I was serving as a bishop about 20 years ago, and I had a gentleman in my ward, such a good guy. He dealt with a lot of health issues. So I felt like I was constantly giving him priesthood blessings, and which was an honor to me. This man was a faithful man, and he would ask me for priesthood blessings. I'm honored to be able to help him out. Well, there was one day, and he was a very affectionate, very good, loving, just an older gentleman. He'd come up and give me hugs. He's just a very nice man. He came up one week and just came up and hugged me, but he held me a little bit close and grabbed the lapels of my jacket in a very loving and kind way. And he was wearing kind of the older person glasses, the ones that, like, you know, you just gone to the eye doctor and your eyes are totally just dilated. Anyway, he was wearing these at church and I could see tears rolling down his cheeks. And I was like, oh, how you doing, my friend? What can I help you with? And he said, I'm losing my eyesight. And he goes, it's getting worse by the day. I'm going to have surgery this week. And he's like, my body can't handle surgery. He was older and couldn't handle it. He just said, if you give me a priesthood blessing today, I know I won't have to have that surgery. Will you please give me that priesthood blessing? And I looked at him and I was just like, did you just ask me to heal your blindness? And he said, yeah, pretty much. And he goes, I have faith to be healed. Will you do that? And at that moment, holy cow, I had to think really hard if I had that within me. But keeping in mind, the priesthood is the power of godliness. It shows you what God does. And I'm just like, yeah, let me see if I can help you out. And he said, we could do it after church. And so I'll tell you what, during that church meeting, boy, my mind was focused. I took the sacrament differently that day. I really focused on, boy, what can I do to really access that power of godliness it talks about in verse 20. So anyway, long story short, after the meetings, I was able to give this man a blessing. And again, this was a very, very faithful man. And I found myself really accessing priesthood in ways that I had never done before. I mean, I found myself saying phrases like, I command your body to respond to the power of God's priesthood. I mean, that's something I don't say too often in priesthood blessings. And anyway, it was just a very powerful experience. I literally felt the power of godliness kind of come through on that. And this good brother and I, we just embraced afterwards, and he thanked me and I thanked him. This was all about his faith. I just was allowed to be able to help out with that. Well, anyway, I ended up going home. We both kind of parted ways and went home. And anyway, he called me later on that day, and I answered the phone. I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "I'm good. How are you?" And I said, "I'm great." And he said, "I'm just sitting here watching TV." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "No, I'm watching TV, like with my eyes." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, "How are your eyes doing?" He goes, "So good. Like they feel so good. I can see clearly. It's wonderful." He goes, "I've already called and I've canceled the surgery." He goes, "I don't need that surgery. Thank you for healing me." And how do you respond to that? Hey, you're welcome. That had nothing to do with me again. That was the faith of a good man, and he happened to come to me. I strive to be a worthy priesthood holder, and it was interesting to be able to access that power. And so I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful that we can do those things. Keeping in mind also that part of this experience is understanding the will of God. And one of the things I prayed for during that whole meeting was, is this what God's will is? And I felt like it was, and the Lord was able to do that right there. So faith of an individual combined with the will of God, that is where you start seeing the power of godliness made manifest. So that's just one little part of this where it says, I have access to priesthood power and blessings. So anyway, if you haven't had a priesthood blessing recently, find someone and ask for that priesthood blessing, and you'll be blessed for it. I know that's true. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And thanks for sharing. Godspeed. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.